Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Randy Gummelt. I'm both a graduate student in strategic communication and practicing data center engineer. Today, I'm honored to share a project that's not only academically rigorous, but deeply personal. A thesis born from lived experience, professional evolution, and a growing urgency to rethink how we define leadership in technical fields. This work is rooted in my own journey from HVAC technician to data center engineer, from hands-on labor to strategic planning. I've spent years in environments where technical skill was respected, even essential, but where communication was often treated as secondary, useful perhaps, but not central. And yet, what I've come to realize is that communication is not a soft skill or a supporting act. It's a form of strategic capital. It's the mechanism through which expertise is recognized, legitimacy is negotiated, and leadership is enacted. Throughout my transition, I witnessed firsthand how communicative fluency reshaped my professional trajectory. Updating my LinkedIn profile and resume wasn't just a procedural task, it was a strategic intervention. It allowed me to reframe my experience, align with institutional expectations, and open doors to new opportunities. But this wasn't just about me, it reflected a broader pattern, one I began to see in peers, colleagues, and case studies. Communication, when wielded intentionally, has the power to transform careers, change gatekeeping, and foster inclusion. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the problem I identified, the theoretical framework that helped me make sense of it, and the findings that emerged from my research. You'll hear about organizational communication, feminist critiques, and the politics of expertise. But more importantly, you'll see how these ideas come alive in real careers, including my own, and how they can inform leadership development in higher education, engineering workspaces, and beyond. This is a story about transformation, not just of roles, but of values. It's about recognizing that leadership is not conferred solely through credentials or technical mastery, but through the ability to communicate, connect, and catalyze change. It's about imagining a more expansive, equitable model of leadership, one that centers dignity, dialogue, and strategic communication as core to professional growth. To guide our time together, I want to briefly walk through the structure of this presentation. I'll begin with my own career transition from working in HVAC to becoming a data center engineer. That shift wasn't just technical, it was communicative. It taught me how legitimacy and leadership are shaped not only by what we know, but how we express, negotiate, and share that knowledge. From there, I'll introduce the central problem. In many technical environments, communication is undervalued. It's seen as a secondary skill or execution, when in fact it's foundational to strategy, collaboration, and leadership. To explore this, I'll draw on several theoretical frameworks, particularly the idea of communication as strategic capital, feminist critiques of expertise, and the politics of legitimacy in professional spaces. These help us understand how authority is constructed and challenged. I'll then explain my methodology, which is qualitative and reflexive. It's grounded in lived experience and case based analysis, allowing me to connect theory with practice. The heart of the presentation will focus on key findings, how career transitions reveal communicative fluency as a form of expertise, how strategic practices emerge in unexpected places, and how inclusive leadership is built through relational engagement. Finally, I'll share some broader implications, what this means for workforce development, educational programs, and leadership pipelines. And I'll close with a personal reflection on how this thesis mirrors my own transformation and why I believe communication must be recentered in technical leadership. This thesis is rooted in personal transformation, one that reflects not only a shift in professional identity, but a redefinition of what counts as expertise in technical environments. I began my career in HVAC, immersed in a world of tools, diagnostics, and problem solving. These were spaces where technical skill was respected and even relied upon, but it was rarely elevated to the realm of leadership. Communication in those contexts was direct, task oriented, and functional. It served the immediate needs of the job but was not recognized as a strategic asset. I transitioned into data center engineering. I encountered a markedly different landscape, one where legitimacy was no longer tethered solely to what you knew, but how to communicate it. Expertise had to be narrated, contextualized, and made legible to institutional gatekeepers. Updating my LinkedIn profile and resume, an act I approached with intention and strategy, became a turning point. These digital artifacts were not just reflections of my past, they were instruments of professional framing. By aligning my experience with the language of systems thinking, infrastructure, reliability, and organizational impact, I opened the door to recruitment and leadership. My digital presence became a communicative intervention, one that signaled readiness, adaptability, and strategic alignment. But the transformation was not just about the resume, it was about preparation. Enrolling in courses on interviewing, small group communication, and public relations equipped me with the tools to navigate this transition. I learned how to frame my experience in ways that resonated with institutional expectations, how to articulate my value beyond technical execution, and how to engage in dialogue that built trust and credibility. Communication theory, once abstract and academic, became deeply practical. It gave me a vocabulary for leadership and a framework for strategic self presentation. It positioned me not just to participate, but to lead. This experience raised deeper, more critical questions. What counts as expertise in technical fields? Who gets to lead, and on what terms? How do communication practices reinforce or challenge the boundaries of legitimacy and authority? These questions became the foundation of my thesis, which explores communicative fluency as strategic capital, particularly for individuals navigating the intersection of technical labor and institutional hierarchy. By tracing this journey, I argue that communication is not peripheral to technical leadership, it's constitutive of it. It enables individuals to reframe their contributions, negotiate visibility, and access power in systems that often privilege narrow definitions of expertise. My story is not unique. It reflects a broader pattern of transformation, one in which communicative agency becomes a pathway to inclusion, recognition, and change. At the heart of this thesis lies a problem that is both personal and systemic, one I've experienced firsthand and witnessed repeatedly across technical environments. Communication is persistently undervalued. In many engineering and technical roles, the dominant culture prioritizes execution, doing the work, solving the problem, maintaining the system, while the ability to articulate, collaborate, and lead through communication is treated as ancillary, optional, or even irrelevant. This narrow framing of expertise reinforces a hierarchy where technical precision is elevated and communicative fluency is dismissed as soft or secondary. The consequences of this undervaluation are tangible and far reaching. Leadership pipelines in technical fields often reward credentialed authority, degrees, certifications, job titles, while overlooking the relational intelligence, strategic thinking, and inclusive engagement that actually sustain organizational health. As a result, individuals who possess deep technical skill but lack formal credentials may be excluded from advancement even when they demonstrate the communicative capacity to lead. Conversely, those who master the language of legitimacy, who know how to narrate their value, align with institutional expectations, and build trust, are more likely to be recognized, promoted, and invited into decision making spaces. Institutional norms reinforce this imbalance by defining expertise in narrow, exclusionary terms. Precision, efficiency, and control are valorized, while dialogue, reflexivity, and collaboration are marginalized. Yet in practice, communication is the mechanism that enables coordination across teams, innovation across disciplines, and transformation across systems. When communicative fluency is sidelined, organizations lose more than interpersonal harmony. They lose the capacity to adapt, to include, and to evolve. The problem is not merely theoretical, it is structural. It is embedded in hiring practices, performance evaluations, leadership development programs, and cultural expectations. It shapes who gets seen, who gets heard, and who gets to lead. And it's precisely this structural dynamic that led me to explore how communication can be reframed not as a soft skill, but as strategic capital, a resource, a form of expertise in its own right. This thesis argues that communicative fluency is not just helpful, it is transformative. It redefines what counts as expertise, reshapes how legitimacy is conferred, and opens pathways for inclusive leadership, especially for those navigating technical careers and institutional hierarchies. Communication becomes that bridge between potential and recognition, between contribution and influence. By reframing communication as strategic capital, we begin to imagine a more expansive, equitable model of leadership, one that values not only what is done, but how it is understood, shared, and sustained. To make sense of the problem, I've described the disconnect between technical experience and recognized leadership. I turned to theory. Specifically, I engaged with the frameworks that integrate how legitimacy, authority, and expertise are socially constructed, negotiated, and often contested. These theoretical lenses do more than explain, they reorient our understanding of communication from a peripheral skill to a central mechanism of institutional power. I began with Thomas Kuhn's concept of paradigm shifts, which offers a foundational insight into how professional norms evolve over time. Kuhn argued that what counts as legitimate knowledge is not fixed, it is historically contingent and subject to transformation. This idea is crucial for understanding how communication, long treated as ancillary in technical domains, can emerge as a central axis of leadership. In moments of transition, whether organizational, technological, or epistem- or communicative fluency becomes a site of innovation and authority. It enables individuals to reframe their expertise, align with emerging norms, and participate in shaping new paradigms. Building on this, I draw from the feminist critiques of organizational communication advanced by Sarah Tracy and Patrice Buzanel. Their work reveals how institutional norms are not neutral. They are gendered, exclusionary, and often invisible to those who benefit from them. Buzanel, in particular, demonstrates how communicative practices mediate access to power and how strategic dialogue can be used to challenge, resist, and reconfigure institutional boundaries. Her scholarship invites us to see communication not just as a tool for inclusion, but as a site of struggle and possibility. In technical environments where authority is often narrowly defined and masculinized, these insights are especially urgent. Finally, I engage with Paul Lenardi's work on materiality and communicative authority. Lenardi argues that communication is not merely a conduit for information, it actively shapes how tools, roles, and expertise are understood and enacted. In technical settings, this means that what we say and how we say it can influence how technologies are adopted, how roles are legitimized, and how expertise is distributed. Communication becomes a mechanism of control, a means of establishing legitimacy, and a driver of organizational transformation. Taken together, these frameworks allow me to reframe communication as strategic capital. It's not simply transferable skill or a soft competency. It is a resource that enables leadership, fosters inclusion, and catalyzes institutional change. This lens helps us see communicative fluency as a form of expertise in its own right, one that can redefine authority in technical fields where legitimacy is often narrowly constructed. By foregrounding communication, we open space for more expansive, equitable models of leadership, models that value reflexivity, relational intelligence, and rhetorical agency alongside technical mastery. Organizational communication scholarship offers a critical lens for understanding how institutions are not merely neutral containers for work, but dynamic systems shaped by language, norms, and relational practices. It reveals that what we say, how we say it, and perhaps most importantly, who gets heard are central to how authority is constructed, maintained, and challenged. Communication is not just a conduit for information, it's a constitutive force that organizes meaning, mediates power, and structures professional legitimacy. Feminist scholars such as Patrice Buzenel and Sarah Tracy extend this analysis by interrogating the exclusionary norms embedded within technical leadership. Their work exposes how the dominant definitions of expertise often privilege rationality, detachment, and individualism while marginalizing relational, emotional, and collaborative forms of knowledge. Buzenel, in particular, argues that communicative practices are not only reflective of institutional power, they are instrumental in shaping access to it. Through strategic dialogue, individuals can resist dominant narratives, reframe their contributions, and open space for more inclusive models of leadership. Tracy's emphasis on emotional labor and authenticity further underscores the value of communicative depth in environments that often reward conformity over connection. Strategic communication literature complements these critiques by reframing communication as reflexive, relational, and deeply contextual. It moves beyond the notion of messaging as a transmission and instead emphasizes meaning making, negotiation, and institutional navigation. This perspective resonates strongly with my own experience, where communicative fluency became a resource for advancement, visibility, and legitimacy. Whether through resume revisions, interview preparation, or digital self presentation, I found that the ability to strategically articulate my values was just as critical as the technical work itself. Communication was not an accessory, it was a lever. Together, these theoretical strands converge to support my central argument that communication must be understood as strategic capital. It is not merely a soft skill or interpersonal nicety. It is a resource that enables leadership, fosters inclusion, and drives institutional change, especially in technical fields where expertise is narrowly defined and often gatekept. Communicative fluency offers a pathway to redefinition. It allows individuals to translate their experience into recognized authority, to challenge exclusionary norms, and to participate in shaping the future of their organizations. By integrating organizational communication, feminist critique, and strategic communication theory, this thesis builds a framework for understanding how language operates as a site of power and how those who master it can transform not only their careers but the institutions they inhabit. One of the most compelling insights to emerge from my research is the transformative power of communication during career transitions, particularly for individuals navigating the shift from hands-on technical roles into leadership positions. These transitions do more than mark a change in their job title. They reveal how communicative fluency becomes a decisive factor in professional advancement. While technical expertise remains foundational, It is the ability to strategically articulate that expertise through language, narrative, and digital presence that often determines whether individuals are seen as ready for leadership. In my own professional journey, this dynamic was vividly apparent. Updating my LinkedIn profile and resume was not a perfunctory task. It was a deliberate, strategic intervention. By reframing my HVAC experience through the lens of institutional priorities and leadership competencies, I was able to reposition myself within a broader professional narrative. My digital presence became more than a reflection of the past roles. It became a communicative asset, a form of leverage that signaled readiness for recruitment, collaboration, and upward mobility. This pattern was not unique to my experience. Across multiple cases in my research, participants demonstrated that the strategic use of language, whether in interviews, performance evaluations, or everyday workplace dialogue, was instrumental in transitioning technical accomplishments into leadership potential. Communication functioned as the bridge, connecting the tangible outcomes of their work into intangible perceptions of credibility, influence, and strategic alignment. Moreover, these transitions revealed the often unspoken norms that govern institutional definitions of expertise. What counted as legitimate was not solely the work itself, but how that work was narrated, contextualized, and made legible to gatekeepers within the organization. Participants who succeeded in advancing did so not just by doing the work, but by mastering rhetorical frameworks through which that work gained recognition. This reinforces the central argument of my thesis. Communication is not merely a soft skill or supplementary tool, it's a strategic capital that shapes access, perception, and power within organizational systems, especially during moments of professional transformation. What emerged from this inquiry was not merely a category of observations, it was a reframing of how leadership is recognized, negotiated, and cultivated within technical environments. Rather than treating leadership as a static trait or a reward for tenure, the data revealed it as a dynamic construct shaped by communicative practices. Communications surface as the connective tissue between potential and perception, mediating how individuals are seen, understood, and ultimately positioned within institutional hierarchies. Strategic self preservation, whether through digital platforms like LinkedIn, resume revisions, or professional bios, proved to be far more personal than branding. It functioned as a mechanism for reinterpreting technical flaws. This phenomenon was not isolated to my own experience. It echoed across peer narratives, interview transcripts, and case studies, suggesting a broader pattern of communicative agency in career advancement. Institutional gatekeeping, as the data made clear, often hinges less on technical mastery and more on communicative norms. Legitimacy is not simply earned through doing the work, it is negotiated through language, alignment, and visibility. Those who successfully transitioned into leadership roles did so by mastering the rhetorical frameworks, which expertise made legible and valuable. This insight compels us to interrogate the criteria by which leadership is conferred. Who gets seen as a leader and why? What communicative acts render someone credible, promotable, or influential? Perhaps most importantly, the research illuminated that leadership in technical fields thrive not only on individual brilliance alone, but on relational depth. Reflexivity, empathy, dialogue, engagement, often dismissed as soft skills, emerge as strategic assets. The most effective leaders were not merely those with credentialed or technical authority, they were communicators who cultivated trust, navigated ambiguity, and fostered inclusive collaboration. Their leadership was enacted through conversation, responsiveness, and the ability to hold space for complexities. These findings do more than support the thesis. They challenge conventional wisdom and point toward a more expansive, equitable model of technical leadership. They suggest that communication is not peripheral to leadership, it is constitutive of it. By foregrounding communicative fluency, relational intelligence, and strategic self-presentation, we begin to see leadership not as a fixed identity, but as a practice, one that can be cultivated, narrated, and shared. The findings of the thesis carry significant implications for workplace development, educational design, and the cultivation of leadership pipelines, particularly within technical fields where expertise is often narrowly defined. At their core, these findings challenge conventional assumptions about communication, reframing it not as a peripheral soft skill but as a central leadership competency. When communicative fluency is recognized as strategic capital, it shifts from being a support tool to becoming a primary pathway for advancement, influence, and institutional transformation. This reframing has the potential to reshape how organizations identify and nurture leadership. It opens space for individuals whose expertise may not be formally credentialed through the degrees or titles, but who demonstrate strategic, relational, and reflexive communication. These individuals often possess deep experiential knowledge, emotional intelligence, and the ability to navigate complex interpersonal organizational dynamic, qualities that are essential for effective leadership but frequently overlooked in traditional evaluation metrics. By validating lived experience and communicative agency, we begin to recognize that leadership can emerge from practice, not just theory, from collaboration, not just control. Educational institutions and training programs have critical role to play in this transformation. By embedding strategic communication into technical curricula early through coursework in interviewing, small group dynamics, public relations, organizational theory, and rhetorical analysis, we prepare students not merely to execute tasks, but to lead, collaborate, and drive change. These pedagogical interventions equip future professionals with the tools to articulate their value, engage across difference, and participate meaningfully in institutional discourse. They also help dismantle the false binary between technical communicative competence, showing that the two are not mutually exclusive but mutually reinforcing. Moreover, these implications directly challenge credential-based gatekeeping. They call into question the assumption that legitimacy is conferred solely through formal education or hierarchical status. Instead, they promote a more equitable framework, one that recognizes dialogue, engagement, and strategic presence as a vital form of expertise. This shift has the potential to diversify leadership pipelines, build more inclusive teams, and foster cultures of trust and innovation within technical environments. Ultimately, this thesis invites us to rethink how we define expertise, how we measure leadership potential, and how we design systems that either reinforce or resist exclusion. By evaluating communication as strategic capital, we move toward a model of leadership that's not only more inclusive, but more adaptive, relational, and transformative. This thesis isn't just academic, it's autobiographical. It reflects a transformation I've lived, a shift not only in professional identity, but in how I understand leadership, legitimacy, and the power of communication. I began my career in HVAC, working with my hands, solving problems in real time, and navigating environments where technical skill was respected. The work was skilled, complex, and essential. It was also often framed as maintenance, not strategy, as execution, not innovation. What changed wasn't just my job title, it was how I communicated. As I transitioned into data center engineering, I realized that technical experience alone wasn't enough to be seen, heard, or promoted. I needed to learn how to narrate my experience, to frame my value in ways that resonated with institutional expectations, and to engage in dialogue that signaled leadership readiness. Strategic communication coursework, like interviewing, small group dynamics, public relations, became more than academic exercises. They were the tools of transformation. They taught me how to translate my hands on labor into strategic insight, how to advocate for myself with clarity and confidence, and how to navigate the unspoken norms of professional legitimacy. By updating my LinkedIn profile and resume, it wasn't just a task, it was a turning point. It was a deliberate act of reframing a way to align my experience with the language of leadership and systems thinking. That digital presence led directly to my recruitment. It opened the doors that had previously felt closed. It gave me the confidence to step into a new role, not just as an engineer, but as a strategic contributor. In that moment, communication became my strategic capital. It was the bridge between technical execution and institutional recognition. It allowed me to claim legitimacy in spaces that often privileged credentials over lived experience. It empowered me to advocate not only for myself, but for others whose expertise had been overlooked, undervalued, or misrecognized. This thesis mirrors that journey. It's both a personal narrative and a scholarly intervention. It's a call to recognize communication as a transformative, especially for those navigating technical careers, institutional hierarchies, and leadership pipelines. It challenges us to rethink what leadership looks like, who gets to embody it, and how we build systems that value not just what people do, but how they connect, collaborate, and communicate. Ultimately, this work is about reframing leadership, expanding inclusion, and building institutions that see people in their full complexity, not just as workers, but as strategists, storytellers, and change agents. As a close, I want to offer a call to action, not just for educators or engineers, but for anyone involved in shaping institutions, mentoring, emerging talent, or building teams that reflect the complexity and promise of our workforce. This is a call to rethink how we define leadership, how we cultivate expertise, and how we build systems that honor both knowledge and connection. First, we must reframe communication. It is not a soft skill, a bonus, or an afterthought. It's strategic capital. Communication shapes legitimacy, enables leadership, and drives organizational change. It is the mechanism through which expertise is recognized, relationships are built, and visions are shared. When we treat communication as central, not peripheral, we unlock its power to transform careers, cultures, and institutions. Second, we must recognize lived experience as a form of expertise. The hands on technician, the self taught coder, the frontline worker, they carry knowledge that is often invisible to institutional metrics but essential to organizational resilience. When we listen to these voices, when we validate their contributions, we expand what leadership can look like. We move beyond credentials to embrace wisdom, adaptability, and relational intelligence. Third, we must redesign leadership pipelines. That means moving beyond traditional markers of authority, degrees, titles, tenure, and centering relational fluency, strategic dialogue, and inclusive engagement. It means asking not only what do you know, but how do you lead? How do you connect? How do you build trust? These questions open space for leaders who may not fit the conventional molds, but who embody the skills our institutions urgently need. Fourth, we must integrate communication into technical education and workforce development. Courses in interviewing, small group dynamics, public relations, and organizational theory should not be electives, they should be foundational. These are the tools that prepare individuals not just to execute tasks, but to lead teams, navigate complexity, and advocate for change. Embedding communication early helps cultivate professionals who are not only technically competent, but strategically empowered. Finally, we must build institutions that value how we connect, not just what we know. This means fostering cultures of dialogue, empathy, and reflexivity. It means designing systems that reward collaborations, evaluate diverse voices, and make space for leadership to emerge from every corner of the organization. This is how we create those resilient institutions. This is how we honor the full spectrum of the expertise and how we lead with dignity, equity, and care. It's not just a theoretical shift, it's a practical imperative. We want to build the organizations that are adaptive, inclusive, and future ready. We must center communication as a core competency and a catalyst for transformation. Thank you for joining today.